Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in again for another deep dive.
Mhm.
You guys found a really fascinating snapshot of Argentina for today, September 26th, 2024 to be exact.
Mm,
We've got international agreements, university budget protests, wildfires.
yeah.
You've got your finger on the pulse, that's for sure.
It is quite a mix, and it's not just a collection of random events either. What's striking is how many of these stories, from that Malvinas agreement to those supermarket sales figures you mentioned, are ultimately tied to Argentina's economic realities and the difficult choices facing its leaders.
Okay, so let's unpack that Malvinas agreement first,
Yeah.
because this one seems to have sparked quite a reaction, especially in Tierra del Fuego and among ex-combatant groups.
Right.
What's behind such a strong response?
Yeah.
Well, to understand the intensity of these reactions, you really have to understand the historical context. This agreement isn't merely about fishing rights or establishing new flight paths, though those are part of it.
Mm.
It goes much deeper, tapping into a long and complex history between Argentina and the UK over the Malvinas Falklands Islands.
So there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely. For many Argentinians, it's about sovereignty, about national pride, about a sense of unresolved conflict dating back centuries. When they see this agreement, particularly the parts about resource exploitation and air connectivity, they view it as Argentina conceding too much to Britain.
It sounds like this agreement has stirred up some old wounds, reminding people of past tensions.
Precisely. Understanding the historical context is crucial to grasping why this agreement generates such passionate responses today, even if it seems like a straightforward agreement on the surface. It also highlights the delicate balance Argentina needs to strike between asserting its sovereignty and maintaining crucial international relations, especially with the UK's influence in the region.
That makes a lot of sense. Speaking of Argentina's delicate balance, you mentioned the economy earlier. We saw that concerning 12.3% drop in supermarket sales. That can't be a good sign, right?
No, it's definitely a red flag. Remember, statistics like that aren't just numbers on a page. That 12.3% drop represents a very real hit to consumer confidence. It reflects the day-to-day reality for Argentinians who are grappling with rising costs and a lot of economic uncertainty.
And this economic pressure cooker, could it be contributing to some of the other tensions we're seeing?
It's certainly.
Things like the university budget protests and the debates surrounding Aerolíneas Argentinas?
It's certainly a factor. When people are struggling financially, they tend to be more sensitive to government decisions that impact their lives, even indirectly. Take the debt decree number 846, for example.
Could you explain that a little for those of us who might not be familiar with the ins and outs of Argentinian lawmaking?
Of course. Essentially, this decree empowers the president to take on more debt without needing approval from Congress. While the government argues it's necessary for economic recovery, the opposition sees it as an overreach of power, further eroding public trust. This in turn fuels social unrest and protests, creating a domino effect.
So we're seeing this chain reaction where economic anxieties fuel social and political tensions.
Precisely. And it often becomes a vicious cycle. That instability makes it even harder to attract foreign investment and get the economy back on track.
And speaking of government decisions that are causing a stir, this labor reform package seems like a big deal,
Yeah.
even for those of us not living in Argentina. I mean, changes to labor laws can have ripple effects globally. So what are the key changes being proposed and what's the reasoning behind them?
You're right. Labor reforms often have far-reaching consequences. In this case, the Argentine government is trying to walk a tightrope, aiming to make the country more attractive to businesses and investment while also addressing concerns about worker protections. It's a balancing act with high stakes on both sides.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where businesses can thrive without leaving workers vulnerable. What are some of the specific changes they're proposing?
Well, one of the key changes is extending the probationary period for new employees.
Okay.
This means businesses could potentially let go of workers more easily during that initial period, which obviously raises concerns about job security. Another major proposal involves potentially shifting from the traditional severance pay model to a fund-based system.
I can see how that would be a big change. What's the thinking behind moving away from severance pay?
The government argues that a fund-based system could provide a more sustainable safety net for workers in the long run. However, critics are skeptical about how this fund would be managed and whether it would truly benefit workers in the event of job losses. There's also the concern about how this might impact those who are already employed and accustomed to the existing severance structure.
It sounds like there are valid points on both sides of that argument. We also saw some mention of new clauses about strikes that seems like it's causing some friction.
Absolutely. These proposed clauses aim to restrict what are known as wildcat strikes, which are unannounced work stoppages and blockades, arguing they disrupt operations and harm the overall economy. Businesses and industry groups have been pushing for greater flexibility and fewer disruptions, citing the need for increased productivity in a competitive global market.
So from the business perspective, it's about creating a more predictable and stable operating environment.
Exactly. However, as you can imagine, labor unions see this quite differently. They view these restrictions as a direct attack on their right to organize and advocate for better wages and working conditions. Their argument is that by limiting their ability to strike the government is essentially silencing their voices and leaving them more vulnerable to exploitation.
It's that classic debate, isn't it? Finding the right balance between creating a business-friendly environment that attracts investment and economic growth, while also safeguarding workers' rights and ensuring fair treatment.
Exactly. And this isn't just an Argentine issue. These debates are happening in various forms all over the world. Globalization, automation, the changing nature of work. These are all factors contributing to this ongoing conversation about the future of labor and the role of government in regulating it.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on, even for those of us watching from afar. Now, while we've been discussing these internal social and economic challenges, we can't overlook the environmental concerns facing Argentina. You brought up those wildfires raging in Córdoba and San Luis. What's the latest on those?
The situation is still very much developing, and it's a stark reminder that environmental issues don't exist in a vacuum. They're intertwined with everything from economic policies to social stability. The fires themselves are posing a significant challenge for firefighters due to a combination of factors. Dry conditions fueled by a lack of rainfall have created a tinderbox-like environment, and strong winds have made it incredibly difficult to contain the blazes.
It sounds like a perfect storm for these fires to spread quickly and become difficult to manage. What kind of impact are they having?
The scale of the fires is concerning. We're talking about thousands of hectares of land already scorched, which represents a devastating loss of valuable ecosystems. Beyond the immediate environmental impact, there's the human toll. Communities have been displaced, and the air quality in affected areas has deteriorated significantly, posing a health risk to residents.
And I imagine there are also economic repercussions to consider, especially given the importance of agriculture to Argentina's economy.
Absolutely. The fires are impacting agricultural land and livestock, potentially leading to lost crops and income for farmers and ranchers. The longer-term economic fallout is still being assessed, but it's undoubtedly going to be significant. This underscores how interconnected these issues are. Environmental degradation can exacerbate economic hardship, which in turn can fuel social unrest.
It's a sobering reminder of how intertwined these challenges can be. We can't just address one issue in isolation, hoping the others will magically resolve themselves.
Precisely. Solutions require a holistic approach that considers the interplay between social, economic, and environmental factors.
It's incredible how these wildfires add another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation in Argentina. It really highlights the interconnectedness of these issues, as you said.
It certainly does. And while the fires are a pressing concern, we can't overlook the other significant events unfolding in Argentina right now. You also included information about the ongoing human rights trials.
Right. These are about seeking justice for the crimes committed during Argentina's last dictatorship, correct?
That's right. These trials are about addressing a painful chapter in Argentina's history. They're about holding those responsible for human rights violations accountable, even decades later.
It must be a very complex and emotionally charged process for everyone involved.
It is. It's a long and often arduous legal process. But it speaks to Argentina's commitment to facing its past head-on. It's about seeking truth, delivering justice, and ensuring that such atrocities are never repeated.
It's a reminder that while dealing with immediate crises like these fires and economic struggles is crucial, coming to terms with the past is also essential for a country's healing and progress.
Absolutely. It's about building a better future while acknowledging the weight of history.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive. It feels like Argentina is at a critical juncture, grappling with its past, present, and future all at once.
You've hit the nail on the head. What we're seeing is a nation navigating immense challenges, but also demonstrating a remarkable resilience. The Argentine people have weathered storms before, and they have a knack for finding ways to come together to rebuild and to keep moving forward.
So if we had to distill everything we've discussed into a few key takeaways for our listeners, what would those be?
The overarching theme here is interconnectedness. We've seen how economic anxieties can fuel social and political tensions, how historical grievances continue to shape present-day debates, and how seemingly isolated events like these wildfires are actually symptoms of larger systemic issues.
We've seen the struggle to balance national interests with international relations, the ongoing debates around labor reform, and the importance of addressing past wrongs through these human rights trials. It's a lot to process.
It certainly is. And while we've shed some light on these complex issues, it's just a starting point. There's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to understand. The situation in Argentina is dynamic and constantly evolving.
That's what makes these deep dives so fascinating. We get a glimpse into these complex situations, but they also leave us with more questions and a desire to delve even deeper.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. It sparks curiosity, encourages us to think critically, and reminds us that there's always more to discover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Argentina's September storm. It's been an eye-opening journey, and we hope you'll join us again as we continue to explore the world's complexities one headline at a time.